Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Poetry, where creativity speaks, the podcast. My name is Candy B, and I am the host and the founder of Poetry, Arts and Entertainment. And I created the show, and I am a multi passionate creative and entrepreneur. I am joined today by my host and partner in crime, Kanar Cherry. Kanar?
Hey, how you doing? I'm Kennard. I'm the co-host of Poetry Podcast, and I'm a multi-instrumentalist, producer. Let me see what else. Business owner, creative, innovator in the DMV area, and I'm just so happy to have our special guest on today.
Absolutely. And just by way of background, poetry was created to provide a platform for local artists and creatives to share their art, to share their story, to connect with their fans, and to share their advice for people who want to follow in their footsteps. And we are excited today to have Jay Cameron as our guest, who will be coming on a little later. But for right now, we are going to go to our poet, Miss Alilaba. Alilaba?
Hi, good evening, everyone. This poem is called You Are Not Alone. My heart cries out with your heart. My tears rain down and mix with yours. With heaviness, I clasp your hand in mine and silently share the pain that etches away the peace, joy, and happiness that once were known. I bow low with you as the gift of life has faded away. But as we bow hand in hand, heart in heart, tear mixed with tear, a rainbow stretches across the horizon as the sun and clouds dance a beautiful, quiet dance that fades and falls into the horizon. Darkness awaits? No. A beautiful, clear, blue sky filled with memories breaks through the darkness that threatens in the mind. Love hugs the moments of a life now gone, and sweet, peaceful, soft smiles slowly caress the beautiful thoughts of the gift that blessed and blessed and blessed. As I bow down with you, hand in hand, heart in heart, tear mixed with tear, I smile, a soft, sad, meaningful smile, and remind you, you are not alone. The end.
Thank you for that poem, Alilaba. But please give us some background on what inspired you to write that poem.
So this year, as we all know, has been a terrible, terrible year. There have been a lot of losses. This pandemic has just created a lot of chaos. So this poem was written just for that person who has lost something this year. Something to just lift up and encourage. And to remind us all that, we're not alone. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful sentiment.
Thank you.
I liked the emotion that you were showing as you read. What obviously hope is something that you want people to take away from the poem. What are your reflections about this year? What's the good and the bad that you can take from it? Like, what have you learned about this year and learned about yourself?
I've learned a lot of things about myself, to be honest with you, from this year. With this having to stay in most of the time and, these all this quarantine and, not going here and there, I've had more of a chance to focus on things that I was not able to focus on before. Just slow down and just breathe and just, what do I really want to do? how can I use my time and achieve something and accomplish something. I find many times in life we're just so busy, there's like no time to stop, and you say, oh, I want to do this, I want to do this, but I don't have time. But this year, although it's been a crazy year, I have found that I've been able to accomplish a lot, and there have been a lot of joyful moments actually within, all the chaos. So I'm very appreciative of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just, had our Thanksgiving holiday, and there's so much to be thankful for. And I, absolutely know that this year has been really tough for most of us. But we do have to take heart in what we can be thankful for, and stay in gratitude as much as we can. So I appreciate what you're saying. It did provide an opportunity, for better for worse, to slow down and do some reflecting. And so I am kind of thankful for that, and that's going to continue into 2021. So we just have to just take those moments. It's the phrase "stop and smell the roses."
Yeah.
Do some more of that. And I would love to hear what you all think. Shawn, what has this year been kind of like? What have you taken from this year, especially coming off the Thanksgiving holiday?
I think it is time. Time is the most valuable resource that we have, and how we use it. Also, faith. I don't know of a year that has required more leaning on faith. Faith that we would get through these challenging, difficult times. Faith that we'll be able to be with family members again. Faith that we will be able to, sustain with family members. It has been, we're in the process. My wife Katanya and I are in the process of adopting 5 siblings out of Idaho, and there's such a vast difference between the spring when they were in school and have to deal with also them homeschooling them now, if you will. So the challenges that we all face every day, and having to stay positive and be resilient, and just stay inspired, and knowing that we have to inspire ourselves. My wife and I have been married 24 years when we got to children, and we are closer now than we've ever been, because all these different challenges drew us together. So I think that's one of the things of having to find a way to stay connected to family, stay connected to ourselves, in the sense of finding time for yourself and deciding that what you're going to do. And so I definitely understand what Alibaba said about using that time. So it's just been extremely challenging, every day. And we had a personal issue with my mother. Ashley is a COVID survivor, and that was just so challenging. And it made me reflect on some things, because I was considering going to North Carolina to see her, where we got some news that was very much, there's nothing we can do except make her comfortable. And I had to deal with my own getting 2 tests and making sure that I wasn't going to, because I had some symptoms, and wasn't going to, if I went to North Carolina, possibly infect anyone of the other family. So just the things that we have to do and challenge, but stay positive and inspired, and make sure we inspire others to lift each other up.
That's amazing. That's quite a year, right? Of adopting, this family and these kids, and having an instant family, and going through the challenges with health, and thank God, Auntie is doing good. So that's a lot. It's a lot to deal with, and the fact that you are maintaining this positive attitude is awesome, right? So I applaud you for just hanging in there, right? That's what we can do. I'd love to know what your reflections are, Rashida. Your mic is muted, hon.
Hi, I'm Rashida. I would say that this year has been an eye-opener. I feel like it's a way of, I'm very religious, so I would feel like it's a way that God has kind of, and if you're not, if you're just spiritual, things happen. So if there's a forest fire, there's regrowth. And I feel like this is the forest fire, if that's a new metaphor I want to use. And the forest fire has lit some people to decide to figure out like what avenue are they going to take, what path, where are you going to go, are you going to scramble around, or are you going to have a plan, or are you already prepared? And so some people have been already prepared. Those who are already prepared, I feel like it allowed me personally to help other people. I recently ended up helping another family member who was going through some trouble, and it even forced me to grow because I asked a couple of my foundational core friends and family, hey, can you help me out? There's this person in my family, they live closer to you. And I need to furnish their whole house. And we furnished their whole house in less than 2 weeks. So I feel like this COVID is challenging people. It's putting people together, and I think that it's helping people figure out like who they're connected to and who they are maybe not so well connected to.
I think that's beautiful that you did that, and that other people supported you in supporting your family, and that's what we can do. That's what we need to do in this time, is really be there for one another in whatever way we can. And sometimes that's a really small way, and sometimes it could be something huge. And I think that furnishing someone's house is huge and wonderful. So I commend you for that, and that's what family is about, right?
Yeah, definitely that.
Well, folks, we are very excited to be joined by our guest, Mr. J. Cameron. Mr. J, thank you so much for being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Well, glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. So welcome, and we are glad that you made it back safely from your trips. And
hold on, hey, Candy, 1 second.
Yes, sir.
Are we just gonna roll right past how amazing his mic sound? Past that, I'm sitting here like looking around like, where's my mic?
Oh my gosh! Well, you sir would pick up on something like that, so
Yeah.
you go ahead and address that one.
When he said he
Okay.
was a producer, and I heard him do the rundown, I said, "Yeah." I said,
Man, that is amazing. But Candy, go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted. I have my questions for Jay later. Yes.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. No, I just want to welcome Jay to the show, and I would love to hear what your experience was when you first landed in the first country that you visited in Africa. Because I had my experience that I'll share with you after, but I'd like to know what yours was.
my first experience was in November 2018, and I landed in Ghana. And when I didn't know what to expect, and I had all of the preconceived notions. I had everything. My mind was all over the place. I remember flying over and seeing the ground, and I was like, "Wow, I made it!" I made it. And then got off the plane, and then when I walked in the airport, I said, "Wow, it's in the airport. It's like a regular airport." And then when I stepped outside, and I finally was able to take in and breathe the air, I was like, "Wow." I said, "This is amazing, that I'm here." And I said, "Wow, they have cars." And the car, I'm telling you, all of these things, and the cars are like our cars, and they run. And so I think that first trip was that trip of realizing how misinformed I was. Of course, I saw things that reminded me of how I had been trained and taught. But then there were so many other things. I was like, wow, the hotel I stayed at. I said, this hotel is nicer than some of the hotels we have in America. So I had to go through that mindset shift on that first trip because everything was just so new, and then there was nothing for me to be afraid of. That was the other thing. I was afraid to go because I didn't know if I just didn't know. It was just all of this. I had to kind of shed all of that, and but I was so glad to be there, and I was so glad. I was like, wow, I'm here. I made it. And I just kept thinking that the whole time, and it did something, because then I went back and climbed Kilimanjaro, and now it's like I've been to Ghana 2 or 3 times since then. I've been back over to East Africa twice. I'm going to Ivory Coast later this week. So it opened the floodgates, and then and I never thought about writing children's books. I mean, it just created this new level of awareness for me, and I wanted to share that with everyone, and that's what happened, and that was my experience, and every time I go, it's a new experience. So I just got back, had a completely different experience. I bought a condo in Ghana, so that tells you I really had an experience, because I said I wanted my base to be in Ghana since that was the first place I visited on the continent of Africa, and so that's yeah, so that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's cool. I was wondering what your emotion was when you stepped off the plane. I know for me, when I visited Dakar, it was home.
Oh yeah,
That's the emotion. It was unexpected that I would feel that way. Like I had never been there. Well, not since I was a baby. And to have this feeling of home was like really wild, you know? So,
yes,
yeah,
I can relate to that,
you can relate to
because
that. Yeah.
it was everything. Remember, I was afraid to go to anywhere in Africa. Now, Africa has over 50
Mm-hmm.
countries,
Mm-hmm.
thousands of different cultures, thousands of different languages. I mean, it's not like a monolith. It's not like just Africa. It's so many different aspects to the continent, and then the different countries. But when I got there, I never felt unsafe. I never felt unwelcome, because they were saying, well, them Africans don't like you, so if you go over there, they're not going to like you. And I did
Mm-mm.
not have I, not one time did I have that experience. Now, I think that's probably has a lot to do with how I approach them. So I didn't come over there, yeah, I'm American and y'all need to be like me, and come on, let me change your way of life, and show you a better way. I never did that. I always appreciated the culture and those who were native to, whether it was in Ethiopia or Tanzania or Ghana or Togo or Benin. I never went and tried to insult their culture and try to say, well, my culture is better than yours.
Absolutely not. We have so much to learn from them. So, Alilaba?
Hi, so my name is Alilaba, and I am a lover of design, a lover of playing with words, and definitely a lover of the continent. I actually grew up in Africa. I grew up in the southern part in Botswana. So I really truly appreciate the fact that you want to share your experiences that you have gained from traveling throughout Eastern Africa, it seems Western Africa, and Northern Africa. But I'd like to ask, what about the rest of the continent? Because there is so much. Like Southern Africa is so different from Eastern Africa, like very different from the people, the cultures. So you can't just stay up there. You need to go further down. So do you plan on doing that as well? Hopefully,
Absolutely.
I truly hope so.
You said you're from Botswana, correct?
I grew up in Botswana, yes.
Okay, that as a matter
Yeah,
of fact, someone was telling me you have to go to Botswana. You have to go to
we
Botswana.
do.
And as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
Southern Africa was on the list this year, and then
Okay.
COVID came. And so what ended up happening, obviously, that shut down all travel for a little
Yeah.
while. And then, because I have some friends actually in Johannesburg,
Okay.
and I was like, okay, I have to get to Joburg, and I have to go and see South Africa. They were also telling me about Botswana, then Rwanda. So it was a few other places, even though Rwanda I think is a little bit north, but the southern part of Africa is. If I could get there this year, I would. I probably won't be able to get there in 2020, but 21 for sure, absolutely.
Okay. It's a great place.
I hear,
Yeah.
in particular Botswana. So the fact that you mentioned it, now I've heard it
Yeah.
twice.
That's excellent. Rashida?
So I hear you are a publisher and an author. So I was curious about one, your themes and how you're picking them. Is it places you've traveled? And two, when as a publisher, have you published anyone else's works?
All right. For your second question, I'll answer first. I've not published anyone else's works yet, and
Okay.
so that I'm sure that will be coming down the line. And as a new publisher, I just kind of getting my feet wet with publishing my works, and then I can guide someone the best way, especially when it comes to doing Amazon. It's a different kind of ball game now than say 10 years ago. But what has inspired, I would say, when it comes to the children's books, are the different places that I happen to visit. So I will go to, I'll just use Ghana for example, and I will take the places that I've visited that really moved me,
Yeah.
and I'll turn it into a book. I just got back from Zanzibar, and the Zanzibar book was already in production. But this is my second time going, well, I added 4 more pages because I did more, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is something I had a chance to, to be a part of. And then something else I did when I went, you just had the picture up of the safari book. What I did was I took a copy of the book back on the safari and had one of the tour guides hold up the book, and I got the video and the picture of them looking at a scene very similar from the book. So it's like the hippo pool, and so he's like reading it while looking at the hippo pool and watching the zebras scratch on the rock. And then the other one was the baboon parent was grooming the younger baboon. So that's the zebras. There you go. So what I did my first time on the safari, I actually took that picture, and when I sent it to the illustrators, I said, listen, I want to create this image right here. So just the fact that I was able to go back to that same place and find a picture, a real life picture similar to that, was really cool. It was a lot of, but that's what inspired it. There's the hippo pool. There you go. That's right. And we just, and so my goal is to help our children, and really our adults too, because the adults read the books as well, establish a different narrative than what many people in my generation have been taught. We weren't given the best images when it came to the diversity in culture and history of Africa. It was either the people who came from there were slaves, or the people don't like you, and even when they characterized the people being slaves, they did that from a negative standpoint versus really saying, well, wait a minute. First of all, they weren't born, they weren't slaves, they were enslaved. And these were mothers, fathers, sons, daughters. They were human beings who were taken captive and against their will, and they were forced into some of these horrible conditions. However, those who made it to this land that we know as America, those were among the strongest of the strong. And I never heard that being taught as a child. It was all, anytime I saw something, anytime I saw someone who looked like me, we were in some form of bondage, whether we were, it was some sort of substance that had us in bondage mentally. We were either incarcerated or we were in some form of chains. But never did I hear coming from the continent of Africa that these were the strongest of the strong, and this is how they survived. And so it wasn't until I got older and I was like, I don't want to wait until, I don't want Africa to be a bucket list item. I don't want that to be, I don't want that. I said, I want to do this now. And so I decided a couple of years ago, I said, I'm not going to wait until I'm in my, 70s or 80s. And then, okay, I finally, made it. It's kind of like, well, no, let me go. And then after I went and I came back, I said, well, I went to the door of no return at Elmina Slave Dungeon in Ghana. And that's when everything really kind of hit me in understanding what happened. I said, I wasn't even supposed to come back, meaning a descendant of those who went through something like that, whether it was in Senegal or Sierra Leone or Nigeria or Benin or Togo or Cameroon or Angola. I wasn't supposed to come back at all. I said, but the fact that I'm here is, one, making a statement. And I said, I'm back, and I'm coming back, and I'm going to climb to the tallest part on the continent of Africa. There's Mount Kilimanjaro. And I said, I'm going to come back, I'm going to buy a property, I'm going to invest in the people, the local people, and help their businesses get established. And because the greatest resource that was taken from there were the people. And so when you don't replenish that, and that's really, because a lot of people say, well, there's poverty and there's sickness. well, why is that? That I never asked the question why. And it was like, well, wait a minute. If you take all of the resources, because that's what happened, the people were taken, and then they built what we know as America and South America and Central America and in the different places, and the economic resources were not put back. And so in those places where you see the challenges, much of that goes back to the economic aspect of it, and then the other resources as well. So to answer your question, that's what inspires it when I go to different places and I see something and I want to tell that story, and I want our children to be able to see it.
Well, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Jay, you make such a good point, and that's something I've always wanted to hear more talk about, and that is the fact that I mean, Africa is where it is
Yes.
because of the colonization, because of the stealing of the resources, and it's it's perpetuated. You know, it's generation after generation after generation. So there's a lot to undo. There's a lot to correct and improve. It's not Africa this just poor, destitute place for no reason,
Right,
just like
exactly.
Haiti. You know, Haiti is not in the situation it is from their own doing. They've been made to pay back a debt that they never should have had to pay in the
Right,
first
paying
place.
back your own freedom. Yeah,
Exactly. So
that's
yeah.
French colonization. Just to, if you,
Oh yes.
because French
Yes.
colonization was different from British colonization, different from Dutch, different from Portuguese, different from Spanish, and
Mhm.
in my opinion,
Mhm.
and Belgium had some rough colonization too, but
Absolutely.
it seems like the French had the greatest impact on the continent of Africa, because when you start looking at French West Africa, you have Cote d'Ivoire, which is also
Mhm.
known as Ivory Coast, Benin, then you have Togo, which has some German colonization elements there, but then you have Mali, you have Senegal, then you have parts of Cameroon. So you start kind of looking and you're saying, because right now you have 14 countries in Africa trying to break free from French financial control
Mhm.
to this day. But then to your point
It's amazing.
about Haiti basically paying the French reparations,
Right.
I mean, that's what it really kind of what it boiled down to. So yeah, you got it. That's East Africa there. That's a whole different story. that's
Yeah.
that's a different. That's where the Arab slave trade was occurring, and that's something that, again, a lot of us weren't taught in school about how the Arab slave trade actually was happening before the European slave trade, and they had some very horrific conditions. They involuntary hysterectomies, castrations. There was a lot going on with that Arab slave trade. But to go to East Africa and see the influence, like East Africa and West Africa, very different. And I can't wait to
Mhm.
get down to South Africa and Southern Africa to see how different it is compared to the other ones. But I recommend anyone who grew up in America to explore the continent of Africa, because it you discover how misled we have
Mhm.
been, just
Mhm.
on so many levels. And what it did for me, it frustrated me, because I felt like my mind had been toyed with. I felt like
Mhm.
someone had been telling me, really in many ways, how to see myself. And because the continent has been, for lack of better words, demonized, because we say one Africa and everybody thinks Africa, everybody's doing the same thing, but just so many different aspects of it. Don't leave those Africans alone. They don't. They sold you into slavery, and it's like it wasn't that simple. It was a little bit more complex than they sold you into slavery. And what I realized is that you had two sides of trauma. Because let's say, for example, you have a mother and a son, or a father and a son, however you want to do it. Son goes out to get some food. And while son is out getting food, he's captured by a slave raider and taken captive. Now, one part of it is because the way that we think is that on the continent of Africa, everybody saw themselves as African, and they saw themselves as brothers and sisters, and so kind of we put it in an American context without understanding that our experience in America is very different than many places for people of color around the world. Our plight is just very different. And
Mhm.
so what happened in a case like that, if we just take that, okay, we were sold into slavery and those Africans don't like us, well, then what about that mother or that father who was traumatized just as much by the loss
Those
of that child? Because there's someone who got in the middle of that. There's someone who came in and disrupted the natural flow of everything. So now that mother and that father is grieving the loss of that child who was taken captive. That child is now going into these horrific conditions and obviously can feel some kind of way about what is transpiring. But now you have two sides that are dealing with grief. But if we just take it from our perspective and our narrative, we just say, "Oh, they didn't like us. They sold us into slavery." But no, though there was someone who got in the middle of that process. So now we're angry. Some of us are angry with the people who were victimized just as much as the person who was taken. So it again, there's so many layers to this whole thing, and when you begin to understand what happened and why people were taken in their entire identity, I mean, just like forget who you are, where you came from, and now we want to mold you into something new. It's it and then you see it, you see the impact, you see the years of trauma that have not been dealt with or reconciled. If we look back through our experience in America and our family history, we begin to see, well, why was that person dealing with this issue and that issue, and where did that come from? And then we deal with the colorism, and we deal with the different addictions and the different abuses along the way. So there's so many layers, and for me, going every time I go, something else is unpacked, and it inspires me to want to encourage people to see for themselves. That's the thing, see for yourself.
Absolutely, Jay. And like you said, there are layers, and it's very, very, very deep. It's very deep. It is, like you said, there's a lot to unpack there on both
Yeah.
sides. And I agree with you. I think everybody should go. Just pick a
I was
place
gonna
and go.
say
Right?
it's like the loss,
Botswana,
the loss of
Botswana.
Yeah.
legacy.
Yeah. Monique?
I was gonna say it just makes me consider the loss of legacy, you know, and so in the absence of your child, and us who are parents can empathize, right? And the lack of your the presence of your child, you, especially if your culture is so focused on legacy and the extension of your life represented and reflected in your children and your children's children. So the trauma associated with the loss of a child, the loss of any family member in a culture that is so rooted in family and extension of life through children and legacy is just horrendous to even consider.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a question for Jay?
Well, I do have a question. So my name is Monique J. Thank you for coming. I'm an educator and advocate and also a life coach. And I do want to make a plug for Northern Africa. In undergrad, I did a semester abroad in Egypt, and certainly Northern Africa is heavily Middle Eastern affiliated, but from a spiritual context, just to be on sacred ground in association with pyramids and the natural phenomena and wonders of parts of Northern Africa. So I would say venture to Northern Africa if possible as well. Um, but on a side note, that's a separate note. On a more connected to this discussion note, as educator, I have to say I'm very intrigued and impressed with your work in terms of youth advocacy and the single sex youth camp that your organization has been associated with and developing. And so I just wanted to know what was the catalyst for your decision to create the youth single sex camps, and also at to date, what are you most proud of in terms of the impact that those camps have had on youth who participated?
Well, when it comes to the camps, and I think it all kind of ties together. And for a long time, I was trying to figure out, well, how do all of these experiences blend? And I think with these trips, and then because I've worked with youth for years. I mean, going on 25 years now. Um, but for me, I look back at all of what I wasn't taught, and then I look back at all of the mistakes I made, and some of those mistakes could have been catastrophic. Some of those mistakes, I know people who didn't make some of the same mistakes I made, but their consequences were much more severe. So I understood there was a reason why I was spared some of the most harsh consequences. And because of that, I said I have to warn and teach. And we're talking about all kinds of consequences: financial consequences, relational consequences, all of these different, and some of them I did, deal with that were pretty severe. But I understood the fact that I was still able to keep moving forward. I said I have a responsibility to create an environment to teach the things that I wasn't taught. I was sent out into the world really clueless on many levels. And when it came to, I didn't really start becoming financially literate until I was almost 30 years old. And that was embarrassing. I said, wow, I'm like 28 years old and I don't know how to do these basic things. Well, why didn't I learn that in school? What happened? They told me to do all these different things, but I didn't understand the basics. I understood how to pay bills and to make sure that my rent was paid and the car note was paid, but I didn't understand how to invest. I didn't understand any of that. So really my life experience and the deficiencies that I had, and then in one of my books, it's called Fatherless Fathering, and I talk about my journey growing up in the DC area without a father, and the different issues, the resentment that I had towards my father, and how it led to a lot of toxic relationships, and the difficulties that I had adjusting, just being a boy, growing into manhood without any real direction, and it's a very honest book, to say the least. But what I needed, the reason why I made it as honest as I did, is because I know that there's so many other people dealing with it, and so many of my peers, they may have gone through one marriage or two marriages, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what happened. And I said, for a lot of us, we just weren't taught. Or the things that we were taught were incorrect, and so our relational philosophies were, we picked it up from someone else who may have had challenges in their relationships, or our financial philosophies we learned from someone else who made poor financial decisions. And so, as I think about our children, if we can start teaching them and molding them from a young age, then as they get older, they have a different perspective, and they can say, okay, you know what, let me manage my money properly. Let me, I can be an entrepreneur. I can buy a building and renovate it, or I can, get involved in this business venture, and I don't have to be 35, 40 years old to do it. I can be 15 and I can do it. And so that's what inspired the different camps along the way, and the different academies and the different things that we're doing. I got a picture today of a 14-month-old who, they sent me the picture, and it came in late today. I would have sent it over, but of her reading this book, just reading it, and I said, wow, I said, that's what it's all about. And they said the little girl didn't want to give the book up because she was fighting for the book because it's so colorful, and she's really into colors. I said, well, now imagine if our children start reading this type of content while they're young. They don't develop the insecurities that many of us have developed. Like for example, I used colorism earlier. When I was growing up, I remember this young lady, and she was of darker complexion, and this was down south. And the people that would talk about her the most would be people from her own community, that looked like her. And it baffled me as a 10 and 11-year-old. I said, well, why are you all talking about her skin complexion so much? And they really, their skin complexion was about the same complexion as hers. So my mind was trying to figure it out. I was like, what's going on here? But what I could tell it did to her is it caused her to become insecure. And so you wouldn't see books like the Adventures of Darren and Destiny 35 years ago. You wouldn't see that. So now I said, well, the way that we offset it, we have to take responsibility. We can't wait for the school systems to come in and do it for us. We now are at an age where we can publish our own material, we can create our own content, we can tell our own stories. So now we have no excuse. And I said, I'm not going to have an excuse, and I'm going to tell the stories. And whoever I'm allowed to reach, then that's who I'm supposed to reach and offer them that perspective as well.
I so appreciate that, Jay. And like you said, and you mentioned, I think something like this along these lines in your book is that at some point you have to take responsibility. You have to be
That's
the
right.
one to break the cycle of the the trauma, the nonsense, all the negative things that you may have been brought up with. And so by you writing these books and doing the camps and all of that, I mean, I applaud you for putting that out in the world and for setting that example. Um, so yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Shawn?
Hi, Jay. I'm just happy to be here speaking with you. I did a little research and I was so impressed. And just to tag on before I move on to the question I have, I was so impressed that I bought both of the Daring and Destiny books because of what you just said. My wife is currently teaching our kids virtually, and the lack of representation of people who look like us was astonishing. So yes, it's exactly what you said. So thank you for doing that. And as 5 little kids here in Tampa, Florida, that you're impacting because they will now know about countries in Africa that they otherwise would not have. So thank you. And then you are having an impact greater than you maybe would ever know.
Thank you. Thank you. I
Uh,
appreciate that.
you talked about the plays that you have done, and way back in 1982, we moved to North Carolina. I was a part of a small acting troupe that my mother's classmate had started, and it was easy to convince us and recruit us because we had nothing going on in the city that literally rolled up the streets at 6 o'clock at night. When in this technological age where kids are so preoccupied with phones and tablets and TikTok and all these different apps and all the visual stimuli, has it been difficult for you to recruit local young actors to participate in your plays? Do they see the value of participating in something that they may think is old and antiquated, putting on a play and having to put in the work? Is it hard to get kids, or are they, once they understand the material and they're willing to do something, are they readily getting involved?
I'll tell you like this. I've never had a problem recruiting for any production, especially when it comes to the youth. And I'm going to tell you why. Because once they hang out with me, they find out I'm a big kid too. And so that's what ends up happening. They're like, wait a minute, I thought he was. No, I'm a big kid as well. And I can still relate to them for whatever reason. And I don't understand it. But for whatever reason, if you put me in a room with, it doesn't matter. They can be 4 years old, they can be 10 years old, they can be 17 years old or 24. And I can connect with them just like 25 years ago. They know that I'm the senior in the room now, but it's like when I start telling them, it's like I can connect to where they are. I can go back and say, I remember when I was 10 years old and this is what I was feeling. And I already know it. It's almost like an unfair advantage. It's like I have 21 points. I'm up 21 points on the game because I already know what most of them are dealing with, and then what I'm able to do is say I'm able to remember what I wish someone would have said to me, and at that point, that's when they say, "Oh, wait a minute, okay, he's real." So how I break through TikTok and all of the other stuff going on, I'm just real. And it's something where they connect, and then they also see the value in it because they say, well, wait a minute, he's doing something. Like when like we just did the auditions for the voices for the animated series that's coming up for Daring and Destiny. And so I reached out to a few of the campers who were in the acting portion of the summer program, and they knocked it out the park. They said, hey, we're ready. What do I need to do? We're right here. We want to be a part of it. Because, and the other thing I do is, being a visionary, I cast the vision. I say, this is where we're going, and here's the benefit for you. Because for anyone, it's always going to be what's in it for me, so it's kind of like showing them, these are some things that we're producing, these are some things that we've done in the past, and then speaking to where they are, and It has not been a problem at all. And I look forward to being able to do live productions again, because I know people will be ready for it, because we're going to do a full-blown Darren and Destiny live production. So we're going to be taking people on these journeys on stage. So
Correct.
that's coming down the pike. As soon as we can get through COVID, then we've already started actually writing the script for that. So no, to answer your question, we haven't had any problems at all.
Well, that's outstanding. I'm happy to hear that, because that was a concern that I looked at. I wondered, what is he doing? How is he connecting to get these young people to understand the value? Because there's tremendous value in developing a work ethic, and going over the information, the material, and then there's tremendous sense of pride in putting on a production. So just thank you,
Shawn. One of the things too that in regard to being your connectivity with who you are and how grounded you are, like authenticity connects with youth.
Yes.
I've been mentoring youth for almost 25 years now. And that's the thing that connects with them, is being authentic and just being genuine with what you're bringing. And to your core, I can actually see in your eyes through the camera, like the level of groundedness that you have, and that actually translates like powerfully, especially with youth.
Well, I appreciate it, Kennard. Thank you.
I was gonna say, Kennard, you understand. You understand well. You hit the nail on the head as far as being able to connect. And if you've worked with youth for 25 years, and you understand that it's they're really sponges, and they want someone to guide them. But I remember being 10 years old, and I could spot a fraud quickly. 15 is the age where you catch every fraud. 15, they said, well, what age would you never want to go back to? I said 15. I said, you couldn't pay me enough money to go back to 15. 15 was rough. 15 was that year in my life. And that was 30 years ago. So I'm like, no, 32 years ago. I was like, no, you don't send me back to 15. But had someone come along, I'll tell you who the people who were the most authentic with me are the ones I still respect to this day. And especially my coaches. There were some coaches who were authentic. Then I had some teachers who were very authentic, and I knew they cared. And to this day, if they need anything, they could call me. It's that type of it leaves that type of impression on you when you're authentic. And I'm telling you, there are some young folks that I mentored when I started, and I'll go back about 25 years. I was early 20s, and they come back to me to this day, and they're approaching 40.
Right.
So they're grown. They're grown with children, and some of them have grandchildren, and they're coming back to me, hey, Mr. J. I'm like, Mr. J, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Mr. J? It's like, you're grown. You're a grandparent. I'm not even a grandparent yet. But that type of connection, I remember. I mean, and so that's what I guess, having done this for so long and seeing the results and seeing people mature and transform. I've seen shy middle schoolers now, even younger than that, because now that I'm thinking about it, one young lady, I've known her since she was 4 years old. Now she's married, she's a mom, she's doing her thing. And I'm saying, I remember when you were like little, but now you're a mom and you have a little one that's 4 years old. And so I don't think there's anything more rewarding for me than to be able to influence someone at such a young age, watch them develop. I've helped children and teenagers and young adults go to college without student debt. So now they come back to me and say, I thank you so much. I wasn't feeling what you were telling me in the beginning, but now that I'm about to get married and I don't have any student loans, I just want to come say thank you. I said, well, yeah, I was like, I told you back then that one day you're going to want to get married. so it's those types of things. And some of them are school teachers, and they're able to take that information and inspire other people. So that's what the influence is all about, and the different ways that it can happen. And I think the Africa component adds just another piece to the puzzle that gives, and this is for anyone who has an interest in it, but in particular for children who are descendants or a part of the African diaspora, when you understand that you come from power now, and I hesitate to use the word royalty because sometimes the connotation, even though we do, but some of those royals weren't the best royals, so that's so it gets complex there. But when you understand that the people that you descend from had power and they built much of this country that we know, as well as because that's why they were taken, because of their skill set, because of their power, because of what they offered and how someone could profit from them. So when you understand that you bring value to the table, now it changes, it shifts. And you say, okay, wait a minute. I'm not deficient. I'm not uneducated. You just took me out of my natural environment. And again, it's complex because there's, a lot of the ethnic mixing that we had. So we're descendants of Africa as well as Europe and other places.
Right.
But it's like when you start thinking about it, you see, I'll give it to you like this. This is what I say now. I'm a global citizen with an American passport.
I like it.
And because I'm a descendant of the continent of Africa, West Africa primarily, and then I have some Kenya that dropped in there when I did my DNA. And I'm also a descendant of Europe. I said, well, I'm not going to limit myself to America. That's one of the reasons why I bought a condo in Ghana. I said, because of that, because I'm a descendant of all of that. And so I'm going to explore. I mean, my focus is Africa because I've been so misinformed about it and it's so much to learn. I said, but I'm not going to limit myself just to America, because if I do that because I did it for so long, I'm missing out on other opportunities. And that's why I went to, now I'll give you all this because I have a book coming, and this might surprise some folks, but for those who are aware of how that whole slave trade happened, when it comes to the majority of the enslaved went to Brazil. They did not come to America. They went to Brazil, and they, in particular, they went to Salvador. That's where the majority went to, a place in the state of Bahia called Salvador, Brazil. I heard about it, but if you look at how Brazil presents itself, they always present the European Portuguese side. So you don't know that there are 100 million Afro-Brazilians in Brazil. And that's more than twice the amount of Afro-Americans, just to give you a context. So I went to Salvador in Brazil and could not believe what I saw. I saw all of these people who look just like me.
Yep.
And the only difference, they speak Portuguese, I speak English. But the interesting part is that Portuguese slavery did not strip them of their identity. So they know where they came from. They know they have an Angolan society. They are very proud about their African heritage and their roots. They unlike when it comes to many in America, we're searching. For example, you're not going to find like DNA tests in Brazil, like in Salvador, that Ancestry and all of that, 23andMe, because they already know. They know they have their statues. They have all of that in place. You might get some stragglers coming in, but in America is where because British slavery was very different, and British slavery sought to erase identity, and so we have a lot of work to do, and conversations like this continue the work, I should say.
Jay, I want to thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us. Do you have time for one more question?
Sure, I'm here.
Okay,
fire away. I'm good.
Awesome. And when you were speaking earlier about the global passport and but the global citizenry, but with the American passport, it made me think of Paul Robeson and how he had said something along those lines about being a citizen of the world. And I really related to that, so I appreciate you saying that. And you're so right. It's I didn't know that about the Brazilian
the slave trade.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah. It's fascinating. And when you go, because I wrote a book. The children's book is coming out about Brazil,
Okay.
Salvador in particular. And another book I'm working on is a book that's going to incorporate. I'm telling you, this thing gets started, right? But what happened? This right here is really cool because many of our multi-ethnic children, oftentimes they identify or gravitate more towards the non-Afro side because they're like, well, I'm not African, I'm not, I don't want, I'm more. So Darren and Destiny are going to have Afro-Brazilian friends, Afro-Latino friends, Afro-Asian friends, and Afro-European friends.
Oh,
And that's going
love
to
it.
become a very interesting discussion when they take them to Africa. So it's going
Absolutely.
because
Oh,
you
that
have a
sounds
lot of
good.
biracial children who are trying to they're trying to figure it out because they're like, well, I'm treated like I'm black, but I got this other thing happening. So it's kind of like this. They're trying to figure it out.
Right. And it's not fair, I think, to deny one side or the other. And sometimes it's mixture, but it's cultural.
Absolutely,
It's not just race, so to speak.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think Shawn had a question.
Yes, wow, I'm sitting here thinking because we're living this multicultural, multi-race experience, and it is so important that our kids are biracial. The kids
Okay.
we're adopting, they came out of Idaho, and they're here, and understanding that they are who they are, and is truly full spectrum. So I can appreciate that. So, but the question I had is, I bought Fatherless Fathering
Okay.
only about 10 or 12 pages in, but I found a statement that was so profound, which is, there is nothing so destructive as knowing your father doesn't love you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And Kanari and I was talking earlier, and I lived this. So my question is, if you can give us one or two things that we can do as Black males to break this cycle of fatherless fathering.
Well, what I had to do, and it was a journey because I guess I was probably close to 30 before it all just kind of clicked. And so for many years, there was the resentment because my father was absent. I didn't understand why. And then it was like an eye-opening moment. And I realized that my father's absence, and this is what gave me a lot of, and I put this in the book. So as you get into it, you tend to a few pages in, boy. If that wait till you get about 50. But the conclusion I came to was my father's absence was actually protection because my father was so toxic and he had so many layers of dysfunction of his own that had I been in his presence, I would have probably been worse because of the level of influence and because I looked up to him so much. And I have so many of his personality traits, all of his children, and even his last wife. She always comes to me. She said, I feel like I'm looking at a young JD. She said, you just don't know how much you're like him, and you didn't even grow up around him. And then his younger children that grew up with him, they say the same thing. So one of the things that I've learned, one, I had to reconcile it. So if we want to break the fatherlessness, reconciling what's happening and not holding on to being a victim. It is what it is. It happened. So now what do we do to change this cycle? And so that's what I was determined. I said, well, I'm going to be present. I haven't been trained, but I'm going to give my children what I wish I would have received. And I'm going to be there. I'm going to be at the games. I'm going to be at the graduations. I'm going to be sure I tell them that I love them. Everything I did, and that's all I knew to do. That there was no, and understanding my example, my influence, and my example was the greatest asset that I had to give them and to tell them to say these are the realities and this is what life is, and to try to just do my very best with learning from my mistakes while still understanding that they're still going to make their own mistakes, but then teaching them from the mistakes that I made, but then also showing them how I overcame them.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'll definitely take those words, and it's just such a you talk about recognizing, and so you can reconcile. And what I heard you say, what I heard in my head was addition by subtraction. That the negative influence actually helped you be and added to your life, as opposed to making a bad situation worse, if you will. So I appreciate that. I can understand that and relate to it.
Yeah, it took me a while to get there, though. As you will read in the book, it took me it took me it took me a while to get there. So I had my journey up until I think I finally got to the point of saying "uncle." You know, my arm was behind my back, and it's like, okay, no mas, no mas, no more. but you're right. It's but that was the final result. But as you read more, you'll see how interesting things got. Yeah, it was a journey.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I haven't got it. I actually have to get like brother Shawn and actually read the book. He and I had a discussion earlier in regard. I'm on the opposite spectrum, so like my parents were young parents, but my dad kind of at 19 stepped out and took the lead on. Okay, I have a son. I have to do what I need to do. And he was very open and honest. The biggest thing that I learned from him is that coming up, I was so scared of my dad, I called him by his first name until I was like 5. He was like, why don't you call me Dad? I said, I don't know. Everybody else call you Mike. I don't want to make you mad. But but it was one of those things. My cousin was like, why don't you call that's your father? Call him Dad. And I started doing that ever since then. But as I got older, my dad, he was tough. But he was tough because he had 3 boys. He knew coming up, when my grandfather was actually a very, I would say, not the best when it comes to character abuse, alcohol, like domestic things like that. And my dad saw that coming up and decided, I'm not doing that. And so he decided to make a change based upon what he felt he did not have. And that kind of speaks to what you just shared in regard to, and what Shawn pointed out too, is like the absence still had some type of influence, and you were able to pull from it. And some people, like you said, you came to that realization at 30 and it started to click. Some people are still trying to figure that out. So yes. I want to say I appreciate you writing the book, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually going to get it as soon as we get off of this today.
Well, thank you, sir. I mean, I think that all of it kind of comes together with fatherless fathering, and I have another one coming out called Toxic Love. So I talk about all my crazy relationship mistakes. That's a whole that's a whole nother book. You get a snapshot of that. You get a dose of it in Fatherless Fathering, but then I really break it down in Toxic Love. Mm-hmm. But then when I thought about the children, and I was laughing at myself on my way here. I said, in my arsenal, I said I have something from 14 months. So if you have something, if you need something, I got something for 14-month-olds and all the way up to 90. Because what I've discovered over the years is that there are people, I've had people well into the 80s, like 85 years old. And I just had a conversation with my aunt who's 83. And the stuff that they tell me, I'm like, no wonder. No wonder. I mean, and it was like, well, why didn't you tell me this like 30 years ago? Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm telling you some of the stories that it was like commonplace for domestic violence, and it was accepted. Whereas if somebody stepped out of line, there would be some sort of physical, like spanking a child. And I was like, that's what y'all dealt with back then. And so many stories. It's like they were waiting to tell me this for whatever reason. I said, well, why me? But just waiting to tell me. And these are people in their 80s, and for many of them, they have not reconciled it. They just kind of dealt with it, and they kind of held it for so long. So there's value. I encourage everyone, if you have someone who's an elder in the family and they're willing to talk, just sit and listen, because they will tell you everything. It's some of the stuff you don't want to know. Some of the stuff you're like, I really don't want to know that. And because like they'll tell you things, stories that you know how you have the family member that you kind of idolize and look up to, and then you find out it wasn't quite like that, and that's what I discovered, and I realized how very dysfunctional both sides of my family were, and now I understand why this uncle had an alcohol problem and why this uncle was angry and or this aunt decided that she was going to do this or that, so there's a lot there, and again we talked about the layers earlier, but if but all of this, from fatherless fathering to traveling to Africa to the children's books, all of that is a part of the discovery. And as you discover more about your own history, it gives you show up in the world differently. You show up in the world more confident. You're like, hey, this is who I am, and this is the story that I've been given. I'm gonna own it, and I'm going to make the most of it, and I'm going to inspire other people to make the most of their stories and their journeys as well.
I love that, Jay. I love what you just said about owning it, and you put it out there, and the fact that you are this serial entrepreneur. You're a playwright. You're an author. You have put on these workshops for debt-free college, and you do the camps, and you're a philanthropist. Um, so I want you to share, like, what was the moment for you when you said that when you believed you could have it all? Because I read the book and it's great. I mean, it is, wow. It's something.
It's like you wouldn't believe it until you like what?
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
What are you?
like,
I'm like
how
whoa.
did that happen? Where did that?
Yeah. But before you get started,
Yeah.
and, you said that in the book you talk about how you realized that you were a good speaker. Like you had an opportunity, and that really started things going. But I want to know, how did you go from everything that you went through when you were younger to starting businesses and then becoming this serial entrepreneur and Renaissance man? Like, what was that moment? What happened when you said, "Oh yeah, I can do all this. This is for me. Not just it's something that's possible, but it's possible for me."
I think it was an evolution, because I remember being 9 years old, and there was an edition of Money Magazine sitting on my grandparents' sofa in South Carolina, and I looked at it, and it was talking about owning a construction company, and I said, one day I want to do that. And shortly thereafter, there was my great grandmother on my grandfather's side. There was an old house that she had, not too far from where my grandparents lived. And I said, I want to start a small engine repair business. So now at this point in time, I'm 12 years old. And I asked my grandmother, I said, would you mind? I want to go it was a correspondence course in fixing small engines. And so she actually bought the course for me, and I started working on small engines. Didn't really know what to do to start the business, but from that age, I was already thinking from an entrepreneurial standpoint. And so when I was 14, my first job was working on a demolition crew in DC, and we would go into houses and clean them out because they were renovating them, and so that's when that process started. And it was just like at every turn there were just like little pieces of the puzzle coming together, and as I learned more, it gave me the confidence. And I think the biggest key for anyone who's motivated towards success is confidence. So at each turn, I'm learning more, I'm doing more. Now I've had a lot of failures along the way, so let's be clear. There have been a lot of failures, lost money, made money, but I look at every failure as an opportunity to learn. And so from there, then I was a recruiter for Showtime at the Apollo, so that gave another level of confidence. Then I know, right? See you got so then I said, well, if I could do this for the Apollo, then I can do my own parties. Then when I started doing my parties and thousands of people started coming to the parties, I was like, man, this is really something. This is powerful, because, and then that's when I started understanding media and how you influence by way of radio, because I would watch how we would put certain radio commercials on the air and how people would respond. So each phase of this, I would do skate parties, I would do my own productions. I was working as a marketing person for other people. It was just all of these different elements came together, and as the confidence level grew, then I was not hesitant or afraid to try. I said, well, you know what? If it doesn't work, hey, at least I tried. And if I give it my all, anything I gave my all to, I don't remember anything I gave my all to that like totally collapsed or failed. It might not have met my expectations, but everything seemed to be pretty successful. So I don't know if it was one particular thing, but I think after a while, it was like, well, this is what it's kind of like when you start finding that sweet spot in life and you say, this is what I do. And this is who I am. And again, it goes back to owning it. It's like, well, okay, this is who I am. So I'm going to embrace it. And I'm not going to try to dim my light to make somebody else feel better. If anything, I'm going to use the light to inspire someone else so they can do what it is that they've been given to do with the time that they have on this earth. And I think the other part is that probably when I turned 45, you start looking at that time frame and say, okay, I'm probably about halfway on this journey. So what am I going to do with this time? So now in life, I don't waste the time. It's like, well, let's do it. Okay, come on, let's give it a shot. Let's try, let's do the children's books. Let's climb Kilimanjaro. I said I wanted to climb Kilimanjaro before I turned 50 because I said, well, if I put it off, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get up the mountain 50. And so I think the confidence level, I think the willingness to fail, meaning that you don't ever go into something anticipating failure. But I understand that failure is also a part of success. And if I'm going to ultimately succeed, then I have to be willing to take the risk of failure. And yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. I think that's it in
Absolutely.
a nutshell. Yeah.
Thank you. Rashida?
Okay, so for my last question, and I guess I didn't properly introduce myself. Thank you for coming and sharing your story. I am a consultant, a real estate. I do real estate, and I'm a Christian vlogger. And I followed you. Candy introduced me. One time she sent me a link, and she was like, "Hey, this Jay Cameron. He has a lot of financial things you can learn about because he knows I have a passion for finance." And I've been watching you. Even when I would comment on your, I guess, philanthropy, you kind of give your stories for free, which I find inspiring. You do your social media. When I have time, I watch them. And so I guess my question is, I see you kind of like the MJ of, at least me, for a Black person, I see you as the MJ of like philanthropy and social media, and you're on this upward path. And I see a lot of Black diaspora, people from the African diaspora. I see this trajectory recently, and you're one of them. And you're going so fast, it's hard to even see or catch up because you're doing so much, and it's so inspiring, and you're probably catching so many individuals who just aspire to be like you. What is one thing that you would tell any age, young or old, that they could do with this social philanthropy, as far as in the United States and separately in Africa? Because we see Akon, we see Acoin, we see a lot of people starting to put out these fillers and branches. I guess I'm wondering, what's your next filler and branch in Africa and here in the United States?
For me, it's connecting with the people on the ground, because and when I say that, meaning I'm recognizing that I'm part of, or I'm a descendant of, some of those resources that were taken away. So anytime I go back to the continent, I try to form a partnership with someone on the grassroots level, whether it's a tour guide, whether it's a restaurant owner. It's like, listen, I'm bringing these tours back, and I want to bring people back to support, because the biggest thing in a capitalistic world, resources. So it's like, well, how can I support your business while making this a win-win? Because my thing is, hey, we need our eyes opened in America, and I want to be able to bring those resources to you. So that's one thing that I'm doing on the continent. It's wherever I go, is trying to make sure I partner with the right people and supporting their businesses on that level. When it comes to America, the biggest thing that I'm doing is trying to open our eyes and say, hey, listen, we got a small piece of the story, and there's more. There's more. So I'm creating content. The books are the first phase. I'm doing a full-blown production about that as well. And if you know, I'm big on financial literacy and entrepreneurship as well, probably as much as I am about African diaspora, because it all ties together. And when we understand that in America, now this is deep. This is deep. This is so deep, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. If you take all of the quote unquote black folks in America and you bring all of our financial resources together, it amounts to about $1.5 trillion. When you look at the wealthiest countries in the world, when you get to number 13, somewhere right around Saudi Arabia, somewhere right there, it is right around that mark. So if you just took all the black folks in America and put us in a country, we would be right around the number 12, 13, 14 wealthiest country in the world. But the way that we're told in America is that we are at risk. We have all these disparities. We are poor. We lack the financial capacity to do all of these different things. And so, but when you put it on a global scale and you start thinking about it, you say, wait a minute, $1.5 trillion? And so what that does, it takes me from a position of being at a disadvantage to say, now I'm in a position of advantage. And I now have the ability to not only invest in America, but I can also invest in Ghana or Tanzania or Botswana or Rwanda or wherever, because I have that capacity. But if you don't know the power that you have and you don't know the abilities that you have, then you're kind of still kind of like on a lack of a better term, psychological plantation to say, well, I don't know if I can do it. But once you understand it from a global or broader perspective, and to say, well, on a global scale, my financial capacity is pretty strong. Although in America, they try to say that it's not. So let me start looking outside of that. So that's the one big thing for me. And that's one of the reasons why I look to educate our children so they know their capacity from a young age. If I teach a young person how to avoid some of the financial traps in America, if I teach them how to, with the mindset of investing from a young age, now they show up in the world differently. So that's what I'm looking to do here in America, is to inspire them from any age, whether it's 15 to 90, because sometimes those 90-year-olds are ready to make some moves too. So you'd be surprised how many 90-year-olds are out here still moving around. We took someone on a tour last year. He was 89. He just turned 90 this year. He was getting around better than some of the 40-somethings. So that's what I hope to inspire across the board: awareness and then putting that into action.
Jay, thank you so much. This has been awesome. We're going to have you back because we had a few more questions. But this was awesome. That last term, though, that stood out to me. You said something like psychological bondage. You said
psychological plantation.
Plantation. Yes, that's a new term. You just coined something right there.
Psychological plantation.
Yes, sir. Wow. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and for sharing your pictures and your photos. They're absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you.
Tanzania in particular, those are the ones that I remember. And I applaud everything that you're doing. I can't wait for the other books. I have my books right here. I can't wait for the series, the cartoon.
Yes, oh yes,
coming up.
Ethiopia. Awesome. They're climbing Kilimanjaro. They're going to Benin and Togo, and I'll be in Ivory Coast. So we're going to do Cote d'Ivoire as well. Anywhere I go, there will be a book. So there will be a Botswana book coming when I go to Botswana.
Yay! Well, again, thank you so much for being here. It was wonderful, and we will definitely stay tuned to what you have going on. Thank you so much. We will see you next time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.